40 miles. That's the exact distance I measured on the odometer. That's the cold, brittle fact that snaps the sanity clean in two. 40 miles of pure, sustained, deliberate malice played out on a sheet of black ice, watched only by the unblinking, indifferent eye of a northern Canadian void. This wasn't a random driver, not a lost commuter, and certainly not an accident. This was hunting, pure and simple. I was hauling a load of pressurized drilling lubricants up Highway 37 to Stewart Cassiar, just north of Dease Lake. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, the kind of hour where the earth feels hollow, and you were the only moving thing inside a massive, petrified cathedral. The temperature gauge in the cab read a static, horrifying -50 degrees Celsius. Air this cold doesn't feel crisp. It feels like microscopic shrapnel scraping the inside of your lungs. Every breath burned, every gear shift groaned a protest, and the only sounds were the tireless, monotonous rumble of the diesel engine and the high-pitched, desperate whine of the tire scraping the compacted snow. The darkness up there is not merely the absence of light. It is a physical entity, suffocating and complete. When you stare out into the night, your headlights only stab about 20 feet ahead before being swallowed whole by the endless black velvet. You rely on instinct, on the peripheral glow of the sparse, frost-coated pines that line the roadside like skeletal sentinels. I had been alone for what felt like an eternity. Trucking in the deep winter means you accept isolation as a fundamental truth. You prepare for breakdowns. You carry enough food and fuel to survive a week, because if you stop, you die. The cold kills you first, but the silence, the sheer magnitude of the empty space, gets to your mind long before the hypothermia sets in.
It was during a moment of profound, hypnotizing solitude, my gaze fixed on the endless shimmering drift of snowdrifts caught in my high beams, that I first noticed the disruption. In the small convex mirror mounted high on the passenger side, a flicker. It was too far back initially to be anything certain. Maybe a glint of ice catching the moon, or phantom light caused by ice strain. I blinked hard, rubbing the fatigue out of my eyes. Blackness returned. I dismissed it as paranoia, the usual dread that crawls into your skull on long, lonely drives. Then, 10 minutes later, the light was back. Clearer now, steadier. 2 distinct beams, small and high-set, emerging from the horizon behind me. My immediate reaction was relief. Another trucker, company, maybe someone I could hail on the CB radio just to break the suffocating silence. But the relief curdled instantly into unease. This stretch of road was not rated for night travel.
It was technically open, but any sensible driver waited for dawn to avoid the deadly black ice patches. And more critically, I hadn't seen a single pair of taillights for the last 200 miles. I reached for the CB microphone, my glove already slick with a sudden cold sweat. "Eastbound, this is the Iron Horse. Anyone copy? Over."
It wasn't the diffuse, slightly yellowish glow of standard halogen, or even modern LEDs. These were tight, blinding white pinpricks, almost painful to look at, and they seemed mounted much higher than any standard cab. I pressed the accelerator, pushing my rig slightly over the advised speed limit for the conditions. The big engine roared, and the truck strained, momentarily pulling away. I checked the mirror. My heart hammered against my ribs, a dull, frantic drumbeat echoing the vibration of the steering wheel. The lights had kept pace. I drove faster, 75 miles an hour on a surface that was 50% sheer ice. My hands were locked on the wheel, knuckles white. The trailer fishtailed slightly, a terrifying sliding moment where I almost lost control, but I corrected it, my focus absolute. I checked the mirror again. The lights had closed the distance I had just gained. This was the first snap of the trap.
The realization that they were not merely catching up, they were matching me. They were controlling the gap between us with unnerving precision. They didn't speed up wildly. They didn't lag. They maintained a distance so exact that if I looked at my reflection in the side mirror, I could just make out the searing white of their beams aimed squarely at the center of my tailgate. I tried to rationalize it again. Maybe they were professional pursuers, RCMP Border Patrol. But police vehicles use oscillating blue and red lights when engaging. This vehicle remained stubbornly, threateningly white. I decided to test them. I slowed down dramatically, deliberately tapping the brakes just enough to signal my deceleration, dropping to 50 miles per hour. The vehicle behind me slowed instantly, not a jerk, not a skid, but a smooth, calculated reduction of speed. The distance remained fixed. They were a shadow cast by my own movement.
A certain chilling thought replaced anxiety. They wanted me to know they were there. They wanted me to feel the surveillance. I flashed my brake lights 3 times, sharp and clear. A signal. Who are you? The vehicle behind me made no response. It did not slow further. It did not flash its own high beams, and it did not attempt to pass. It simply held its position. A predator maintaining the optimal attack distance. I felt a coldness that had nothing to do with the outside air. It started in my stomach and spread like chemical burn through my chest. I pushed the engine again, accelerating to 80, the cab rattling violently. If I could just shake them, if I could break their line of sight, I might gain time to find a pull-off, an old logging road, anything to hide the rig. But the Stuart Cassier in the dead of winter offers no mercy and no exits. There was no shoulder, only a sheer drop into snow-filled ditches or a solid wall of frozen pine.
Still, these lights, tight and white, remained glued to my rear bumper. I started talking to myself, my voice shaky and brittle in the silence of the cab. It's just the driver. It's just someone in a hurry. Lies, all lies. No one in a hurry maintains this distance for 20 miles. At mile 22, I did something desperate. I threw on my right blinker, signaling an intention to pull over onto a non-existent shoulder. I leaned into the steering wheel, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might punch through my ribs. I watched the mirrors. As soon as my blinker clicked on, the follower shifted, just a hair. It accelerated maybe 5 miles per hour, closing the distance ever so slightly. It wasn't pulling around, it was preventing my maneuver. It knew what I was planning. It was dictating the flow.
I wrenched the blinker off and swerved back into the center of the lane. My breathing was ragged, shallow gasps of frigid air. This wasn't driving anymore.
This was a choreographic ritual, and I was a central victim. He finally managed to get a desperate look at the vehicle itself, a fragmented glimpse in my side mirror as we rounded a shallow, icy curve. The light was so fierce it washed out most details, but I saw enough to solidify the terror. It was impossibly high. Not a semi, but something taller than my 18-wheeler's cab. It was also unnervingly narrow, almost skeletal in its profile. It didn't look like any commercial or civilian vehicle I had ever seen. The body appeared dull, matte black, absorbing the scant available light. And the lights themselves, those high white beams, they weren't recessed into a grille or fender. They seemed mounted on stalks, long vertical posts extending from the frame, positioning the beams perfectly at the level of my truck's rear windshield. And there was no other light. No cabin glow, no running lights, no taillights visible beneath the blinding glare they projected onto my trailer. Eu for uma silhueta de blackness, radindo two piercing spears de white light. Eu slamei meu fist onto o dashboard. What the hell are you? Eu retemo mile 35. Meu fuel light had come on, a yellow indicator of my increasing desperation. Eu sabia o next major opportunity for a turn-off, an old mining road that looped back to the main highway, was about 5 miles ahead. If you could make that turn, a sharp, difficult maneuver, you could possibly hide the rig among the trees. The knowledge that you had an exit strategy must have been broadcast somehow, because that's when the pattern broke. Up until now, the follower had maintained its perfect, unnerving distance. But as I passed the mile marker 37, the distance began to shrink. Slowly, deliberately, the lights crept closer. I gripped the wheel until my hands ached, pushing my speed past 85. The trailer began to feel dangerously loose. I was gambling control against distance, and I was losing both.
Our follower accelerated very steadily, refusing to break its unnerving pace, but relentless in its forward trajectory. At mile 38, the searing light behind me was so intense that my cab filled with an oppressive, hostile whiteness. I could see my own wide, terrified eyes reflected in the rear-view mirror, bathed in the cruel light of that thing pursuing me. And then I saw the detail that stole my breath and replaced it with a suffocating, paralyzing fear. As the lights pressed closer, aimed precisely at the back of my trailer, the light was deflected back and forth across my internal mirrors. For a fleeting second, the glare shifted, and I caught a view high up past the blinding beams. There was no windshield. Where the cab of a normal vehicle should have been, there was only more black, matte structure. No glass reflecting the environment, no flicker of a dashboard, no silhouette of a driver, just a high, featureless wall of absolute shadow dominating the light.
A realización hit me como a physical blow. Whatever fuese following me was not designed for human comfort or even human operation. Era tall, narrow, and silent, and these lights were not meant for visibility. They were meant for observation. They were meant to paralyze prey. I was being hunted by an human machine, or something far worse disguised as one. And at mile 39, it was close enough for me to hear it sound over my own roaring engine. It wasn't the sound of an engine or tires. It was a high-frequency, metallic scraping, like teeth dragging over cold steel, combined with a deep, throbbing resonance that vibrated through the floorboards and into my very bones. I was exactly 1 mile from the turnoff, and the thing behind me was so close now that I could feel the heat radiating from its massive, dead lights. I knew with sickening certainty that if I slowed down to attempt that turn, it would be the exact moment the nightmare decided to strike.
I was trapped on 40 miles of frozen hell, and the silence of the Canadian winter had just been broken by something calculating and monstrous. The hunt was over. The execution was about to begin. The moment the engine died, the silence didn't rush in, it crushed in. It was a physical thing, the absolute nullity of sound that swallows up the high-pitched whine of tinnitus and leaves you with the naked, frantic thudding of your own heart. I was no longer followed by something. I was surrounded by it. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white, breath steaming up the windshield in ragged bursts. The car was nothing more than a thin metal shell against minus 40-degree air in the void of the Yukon winter. 40 miles back, the last turnoff. 40 miles forward, nothing but the promise of more frozen blackness. I had pulled onto a tiny, unplowed service road, a desperate, stupid maneuver that signaled to whatever was behind me that I was done running.
Yeah, I hadn't stopped the cheese. And a crunching started. And wasn't a rhythmic purr of the oiling engine. And wasn't a sewing the tires on frozen gravel. And was heavy. And was organic. And was a sewing the thorns of compressed weight settling onto the packed snow, followed by a slow dragging noise, like a body being dragged, not towed, but hauled. It sounded like wet leather tearing on crystallized ice. I fumbled for my phone, but I already knew the answer. No service. Just a glowing icon promising emergency contact I would never make. My high beams cut through the suffocating darkness behind the car, reflecting off the swirling snow dust. I leaned forward, my face inches from the frosted rear window, trying to pierce the gloom. I saw nothing resembling a vehicle, no headlights, no tail lights. But the sound was growing louder, closer, resolving into individual, deliberate movements. Grunge, screep, drag.
The sound of the pursuit had always been characterized by speed and proximity, a high-octane error. Now it was slow, meticulous, and terrifyingly patient. It moved like something that had all the time in the world, because it knew I was trapped in this pressurized metal box, freezing, listening to the approach of my own end. I felt the metallic stink of my own fear, a cold, coppery scent, mingling with something else that drifted in through the vents. It was not exhaust, nor was it the sterile smell of the Canadian forest. It was a deep, pervasive scent of putrefaction, like old blood mixed with swamp water and ammonia.
It smelled like the cold itself was rotting. I turned the ignition key. Nothing. The cold had seized the engine block faster than I anticipated. Or perhaps the sheer kinetic terror had paralyzed the starter. I tried again, my hand shaking violently. A weak groan from under the hood, then silence. A dead box, a tomb. That's when I saw it.
No vedanting no rear view mirror, my reflecting no side mirror, distorted by the angle. A shadow, impossibly tall, standing just at the tree line, about 50 feet away. But the shadow wasn't static. It was defined by movement, a strange, jerky oscillation, like a marionette whose strings were being controlled by a panicked child. I gripped the dash, pressing my forehead against the chilled vinyl. I tried to convince myself it was a cluster of frosted pines, or perhaps some bizarre atmospheric distortion caused by the extreme cold. But trees don't emit that heavy, guttural sound, nor do they move with that calculated, predator-like rhythm. I slowly raised my flashlight, my only non-automotive piece of functional technology, and pushed the button. The beam was thin and weak in the overwhelming night, but it was enough. The creature, I cannot call it a man or a beast, was covered in a thick, matted layer of what appeared to be frozen road debris, bark, and old, torn fabric.
It was roughly bipedal, but its limbs were too long, ending in massive, shovel-like appendages that dragged on the snow. Its body seemed fused and elongated, stretching up beyond the height of the car. It was draped, almost camouflaged, in the refuse of the road I had just traveled. And wrapped around its left shoulder, clearly visible in the beam's weak light, was a tattered, bright orange snow fence, the kind used by highway crews to control drifting snow. I had driven past miles of that specific cheap plastic mesh. This thing hadn't just followed me, it had been accumulating the environment around it, shedding pieces of the highway like a monstrous living snowplow. This was the terrifying revelation, the point of no return. It wasn't pursuing me in the night, it was an element of the road, something ancient and hungry that had been roused by my passage and decided to attach itself to me. The 40 miles of following had just been the warming up, the psychological preparation.
It wasn't driving a truck. It was the highway itself demanding a toll. I watched, frozen in place, as it began to move toward the car. The rhythm changed. Less scrape, more thump, shuffle, thump. My eyes fixed on its head. It had no discernible face, merely a cavity where the eyes should be, dark and soaking up the light. But just below that cavity, I caught the faintest glint of wetness. It was moving its mouth. It was mimicking something, trying to make a noise that wasn't a thump or a drag. And then I heard it, a sound that bypassed my ears and drilled straight into my hind brain. A high-pitched, wet clicking, like two massive molar stones grinding against each other, interspersed with shallow, ragged breathing that sounded exactly like a frozen engine trying to catch. It was imitating me. It was imitating the pursuit.
The thing reached our rear bumper. Its large hand, a fused mess of what looked like blackened, ice-coated flesh and wood splinters resting against the tin metal. The car creaked under the weight. The stench of rot intensified instantly, flooding the small cabin. It was so potent, it tasted metallic on my tongue, making my eyes water. Then it began to tap, slow, deliberate taps on the trunk, right behind my head. Tap, tap, pause. I instinctively shrank down, pulling my neck into my collarbone, whimpering silently. The cold had ceased to be an external inconvenience. It was now an internal presence, a deep, pervasive ache in my bones that felt exactly like the weight of the thing outside. The tapping stopped. There was a moment of absolute, heart-stopping silence. I could hear the microscopic shifting of the ice crystals on the windshield.
And then the sound of the fingernails, not human nails, but thick, curved talons, drawing down the length of the rear windshield, a screech of friction that felt like an ice pick being dragged across my exposed nerves. The creature moved around to the driver's side. I could see its shadow looming over the passenger window now. It was massive, blocking the stars entirely. I shut my eyes, praying for the end to be swift, praying that the cold would put me to sleep before the thing could get inside. When I opened my eyes, the face was inches from the glass. It was pressed so close that the moisture on its non-skin fogged the pain. I finally saw the details. The head was long and narrow, but what truly struck me was the texture. It wasn't fur or skin or scale. It was composite, woven from what looked like dried mud, frozen vegetation, and strips of discarded rubber.
There were my small, perfectly circular stones, pebbles from the highway shoulder, embedded haphazardly into the matrix that formed its face, and the eyes, not dark cavities, but two large, perfectly clear lenses of pure, polished ice, reflecting the weak dashboard light back at me. They were devoid of depth, devoid of intelligence, focused only on my form with the ancient, unblinking hunger of a mineral wanting to absorb organic matter. It lifted one of its appendages. It was disproportionately large, terminating in four knobby, thick fingers, each tipped with a blade-like shard of frozen bone. It brought the appendage down, not with a slam, but with a controlled, terrifying precision. It pushed the sharp point against the window glass, right next to my head. The glass didn't shatter, it yielded. The sound was not an explosion, but a high-pitched shriek, followed by a wet, grinding tear, the sound of diamond cutting glass, but slower, agonizingly deliberate.
A crescent shaped fissure instantly radiou out do contact point, followed by another e another. Era tracing the shape de minha cabeça, criando perfect semicírculo de stress lines. O cold air rushed instantly, biting vicious, carrying with that smell de rotting earthy metal. Meus nóstrios burned e filme de rime instantly formed na inside do dashboard. Eu screamed, a sound swallowed instantly pela heavy insulation do car e pela silence da Canadian Wild. A entity pulled back slightly, admirando its handiwork. Then, with a terrifying swiftness, it slammed the flat base of its arm against the weakened glass. Window disintegrated into millions of sparkling needle-sharp fragments, which exploded inward. Eu scented the shrapnel pepper my face and neck, shallow freezing cuts. The noise was deafening, a final violent punctuation mark to 40 miles of dread. The creature's head moved through the now open window space, slowly, gracefully.
Its breath, if that's what it was a visible, thick cloud of chilling vapor carrying the nauseating odor directly into my face. I didn't think, I acted on pure, desperate adrenaline. I shoved my door open, stumbling out onto the snowbank. The immediate shock of the cold hitting my exposed skin with the force of a physical blow was secondary to the terror of escaping the car only to be truly exposed. I didn't run, I couldn't. I scrambled backward on my hands and knees, my breath coming in ragged, useless gasps. The entity didn't follow me immediately. It remained half in and half out of the car, its massive, ice-lensed eyes fixed on something inside. I watched, shivering so violently I thought my ribs would crack as it used its massive hands to delicately pluck something from the passenger seat. It wasn't a bag or a map or my wallet. It was a single crumpled aluminum foil wrapper from the last granola bar I had eaten about 80 miles back.
It brought a piece of mundane garbage up to the cavity where its mouth was supposed to be. I heard the wet, clicking sounds again, the sound of grinding teeth or stone, and then the faint metallic tearing of the foil being slowly consumed. It was collecting me piece by piece, starting with my remnants. The realization was blinding. It didn't just want to stop me. It wanted to erase the evidence that I had ever traveled this road. I finally found my legs and bolted, not back toward the highway, but blindly into the dense black tree line. I didn't look back. I ran until my lungs were screaming and my muscles locked up, until the cold ceased to be pain and became numbness, till I fell face first into a drift of light powder snow, losing consciousness almost instantly. I woke up 22 hours later, strapped into a stretcher inside a rescue helicopter.
A snowplow operator, doing an early morning run, found my car, abandoned, driver's side window completely gone, and the engine compartment mysteriously scorched, as if a localized internal fire had occurred. They found me half a mile into the woods, covered by snow, suffering from severe hypothermia, but miraculously alive. The highway patrol investigated the scene. They found no tracks other than my own running into the woods, and a single set of massive, unidentifiable drag marks leading up to the vehicle. They found no trace of an accompanying vehicle, and no one reported seeing anything unusual on that desolate stretch of road in the preceding 48 hours. I was treated for frostbite, minor lacerations,
and catastrophic psychological distress. I told the police the full story, omitting only the description of the entity itself, knowing how insane it would sound. I simply said I was terrorized by a follower and fled the car when they broke the window.
But the fear never left the car. It came back with me. When I was finally released from the hospital weeks later, I was forced to deal with the insurance company regarding my totaled vehicle. The adjuster, a grizzled man named Frank, called me directly. "Son," he said, his voice hesitant, "we found something strange when we processed your vehicle for salvage." My blood went cold again. "What was it, Frank?" "In the center console, buried beneath some change, we found what looked like a small, smooth stone, not native to the area. We tossed it in a plastic baggie, thinking maybe you wanted it back." "Was there anything else?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Just that, and this smell. Even after 2 weeks in the lot, the car smelled like a slaughterhouse mixed with something chemical. We had to ozone it twice before crushing it. It just wouldn't leave." I told him to keep the stone. The following never stopped. It simply changed form.
Now, whenever I drive, no matter the time of day, no matter the temperature, I keep the cabin air on full blast, never recirculating. I'm constantly sniffing the air, searching for that specific, decaying metallic stench. I've moved thousands of miles south, away from the ice and the long, desolate highways, but sometimes, when I'm alone in my apartment, I can swear I hear a faint, distant thump, shuffle, thump from the street below, accompanied by a sound like fine stones being slowly ground together. And always, always, in the darkest corner of my peripheral vision, I feel the chilling, unblinking focus of those clear, frozen eyes. It followed me for 40 miles, but it is still following me now. It just doesn't need a vehicle anymore. If you ever find yourself driving alone on those northern roads, keep your foot on the gas. Never, under any circumstances, stop, because the things that walk that highway don't just want to pass you, they want to absorb you.
And if you've made it this far, maybe you felt that chill too. If the deep, cold dread of the true darkness is something you understand, subscribe, because the road is long, and I have plenty more stories of what happens when the road follows you back. Don't drive alone.